Hi everyone. So for this podcast challenge, I've listened to the Spark Creativity Teacher podcast and really enjoyed it. I've listened to, I think, 4 or 5 episodes so far. And yes, let's see what I have to say about it. So the podcast is run by Betsy Potash, who's a former educator and a chocolate cake lover, as she describes herself, hence the cake here. She also describes herself as a very creative teacher, which is evident in her podcast because she continues to share insightful episodes on how to teach creatively, how to incorporate different methods into the classroom, and how to consider different learners. So I really enjoyed it. Now, I've decided to compile my thoughts on the podcast using a traditional pros and cons list. So the first thing I really liked with this podcast is the duration of the episodes. Unlike most podcasts I found, this one really varies. So you can find some episodes that are like 10 minutes long, whereas others will be up to an hour long. So as a listener, you can really pick and choose depending on the time you have. So this I think is great. Another thing I really liked is how inspiring the episodes are. Betty has a very calm and soft-spoken voice, but still she manages to really engage the listener, and her enthusiasm is contagious, which always kept me listening, and I never felt bored or anything while listening. And every now and then she will also invite guest speakers to the podcast, which I think is great because that way you get to know more about a field spoken from somebody who has a lot of knowledge. So this could be, for example, how to work with short stories in the classroom, or some tips for new teachers. And I've listened to some of these episodes with guest speakers, and I found them to be great too. My last positive aspect with this podcast would be all the educative trends mentioned. There are even some episodes that are named after them, so definitely if you actually look at the podcast, you can find them in the list of episodes. But some of them being like Literary Friday, I believe, Anchor Charts. There are more. I can't really remember all of them, but there are a lot of mentions of these with good explanations. And as a listener, I found it to be helpful to actually get a context where I could connect these trends to actually to an actual classroom setting rather than just read about them in a book. As for some negatives, I struggled to come up with some cons for this podcast because, as you can probably tell, I really enjoyed it. But I guess you could argue that it's too American at times because it's set in the US, and because all of the guest speakers and Betsy herself are American, the context will be, of course, very American too. And the educative system there versus here in Sweden might differ. And the same goes for teaching styles, perhaps. But if anything, I just think this was interesting to listen to. And as a listener, you can actually compare the two with each other. My last negative point would be that the podcast episodes, the shorter ones, could sometimes be a bit too brief for my liking. Although it's very convenient to just listen to a 10-minute episode, sometimes I felt as if I really would have liked to just dig a bit deeper into the subject and not just get a brief overview, but rather a more thorough understanding of something. Now, if you do listen to this podcast, I can recommend some of my favorite episodes. If you just choose one, though, definitely go for episode 80. It's the Let's Teach Students How to Collaborate episode. I listened to this last night and I thought it was very eye-opening because Betsy reminds teachers of the importance of collaborating in the classroom. Now, it's not only useful when completing a task, but actually outside of the classroom too. Students will be partners, future parents, probably work, have jobs where they need to collaborate. So discussing this was very insightful, and it opened my eyes, as I said, to the importance of collaborating in the classroom, because even I as a student can sometimes feel it to be a bit daunting to have to work in a group sometimes, but Betsy's words of encouragement resonated with me and reminded me of how worthwhile it can be to actually collaborate in the classroom. Now, what did I think about this podcast challenge? I really enjoyed it, actually. I've been able to listen to a few podcasts while doing my makeup or walking around. So definitely I've definitely felt as if though I can use some of my dead time and actually learn something, which was nice. Would I try to do this again? Yes, I think so. I'll try and listen to a teaching podcast every now and then. I would like to end this with a few tips, actually, on how you can listen to podcasts in an even better way. My first tip would be to create a Spotify playlist or like a podcast playlist. The way I do this is I add podcast episodes on Spotify to one list for my favorite episodes, and then I have another list with all of the episodes I want to listen to. This way, it's so easy for me to just pick an episode and I don't really need to think about it, whereas before I would have to spend several minutes just scrolling through all the options and trying to decide on something. It's just, it takes so much time, so this has really saved a lot of time. And then my last tip would be to actually take a few notes. Of course, if you're doing the dishes or doing your makeup, this might be difficult, but otherwise, it's actually great to just write down a few reflections, or if there's anything that the speaker says that resonates with you, just writing it down, I found was really good to just help me recall the information and be able to actually tell others what I've learned. So thank you very much for listening. And if you have time, definitely check out this podcast. Hope you have a great day. Bye.